Oh, thank you very much, Yair. So let's get started. First of all, oops. Okay. Okay. Uh, okay, this paper appeared in Nature Human Behavior just about a year ago, and it was posted on the website of this conference. All right. Now, why do game and economic theory? That's the question that we start with. And the answer is, we do game theory to study and to understand strategic interaction, in particular how the economic world works. As we all know, economics is a part of game theory. It's included in game theory. So we do game and economic theory to understand how to understand strategic interaction and how the economic world works. Question, but game and economic theory assume rationality, that people act to promote their goals. Behavioral economics has shown that they do not. They act by rules of thumb, what they call heuristics and biases, often with poor results. All right. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to adopt the approach of a philosopher by the name of Hegel, who lived a good bit over 200 years ago, at the end of the 18th century, and we're at the beginning of the 21st now. Not so much at the beginning, we're well into the 21st. And he had this idea that people promote a thesis, and then come other people and they promote an antithesis. And then one comes and makes a synthesis. One puts together the best parts of the thesis and the best parts of the antithesis, and we throw out the bad parts of both. And that's what we're going to do. The thesis is going to be game and economic theory, which we call GET. Okay, oops. That's the thesis. Rationality, that people act to promote their goals. That's what we do in game and economic theory. We start out with that. And the antithesis is behavioral economics, irrationality. People don't act to promote their goals, okay? They act by rules of thumb, often with poor results. And I'm going to propose today a synthesis, which I call rule rationality, that people act by rules of thumb, but these rules are rational, usually, not always. They usually promote people's goals, okay? That's the synthesis that I'm going to propose today. And that's proposed in my paper that was published over a year ago, okay? The conclusion is that game and economic theory are relevant after all, because usually the goals are promoted, and it's the promotion of the goals, that's what's called rationality. The people strive to promote their goals, and that is what the rules of thumb do. Okay. Now, we don't claim priority for the observation that the rules usually promote people's goals. The rules of behavioral economics, the heuristics and biases. We're not the first people to say that these rules are usually good. Okay. There's somebody else who said that beforehand, before us, way before us. In general, they said these heuristics are quite useful, but sometimes they lead to severe and systematic errors. Guess who said that? Guess who said it? The high priests of behavioral economics, Tversky and Kahneman. And they said this themselves in their seminal paper in Science, which is almost 50 years old now, okay? We're going on 50 years. Judgment under uncertainty, heuristics and biases, okay? And then somebody else said it 20 years later. These heuristics are often useful, but they sometimes lead to characteristic errors or biases. As somebody who's completely different said that, not Tversky and Kahneman, but Kahneman and Tversky, okay? Kahneman and Tversky said this in the Psychological Review in 96. Also, now this is, it's about a quarter of a century ago. All right. So what is new today, okay? If I'm not saying something, you know, what am I going to say? I mean, they anticipated me. The behavioral economists par excellence anticipated me. So what am I going to try to sell to you today? It's that behavioral economics dwells exclusively on the sometimes, the severe and systematic errors where the heuristics do not work, okay? That is what they try to sell, that the heuristics don't sell. But that's the sometimes, okay? It's not the usual. In our humble opinion, the insight that behavioral economics yields into the in general, where the heuristics do work, is much more important. So I'm gonna shift the emphasis in behavioral economics. And I'm going to say that game and economic analysis is valid after all, because in general it's valid where the heuristics do work, and that's much more important. And we do claim priority on this observation. Question, when do the rules lead to severe and systematic errors? And the answer is in exceptional or contrived situations. Exceptional situations or contrived situations. In behavioral economics, it's very often contrived situations. Why do they lead to severe and systematic errors in those situations? And the answer is because the rules which were not consciously adopted did not spring from nowhere. They evolved biologically or culturally. Cultural evolution is learning. Yeah, you see what you learn in the psychological sense of the word. You learn what's good for you by experience. Evolution does not work on the exceptional or contrived situation. Evolution works on what happens every day. You learn a rule, or a rule evolves biologically. We'll see a lot of examples of that. It works by survival of the fittest. A rule survives, or it's adopted, if and only if it works well when applied repeatedly. An occasional instance where it does not work has no effect. It doesn't matter. It does not interfere with biological evolution. It doesn't interfere with cultural evolution, with learning. If occasionally you do something, you go by a rule, and occasionally it doesn't work, but usually it does work, you'll stick to it. And of course, a contrived situation certainly has no effect, since it never occurs in practice, okay? If you do a survey or an experiment in the behavioral economics, it's contrived, it's in a scenario which never happens, it doesn't happen in real life, so you're not gonna learn it, it's not gonna evolve. And the reason that these rules or heuristics or biases evolved is because doing game theory and economics by logic and by figuring out what's good for you is much too complicated for any of us. Yes, certainly for the man in the street, but also for the people who are currently listening and speaking at this session of the Stony Brook conference. So people don't figure these things out. They go by rules, and these rules usually are, and almost always are, good. Okay. Let me give some examples of that. We'll go. The first example is going to be Linda. Linda is perhaps the most famous of the behavioral economist examples. Okay. So she is a young, single, outspoken, and very bright. As a university student, she was deeply concerned with discrimination and social justice. People in a survey were asked, is it more likely that Linda is a bank teller or that she is a bank teller and an active feminist? Okay. People were asked this. A lot of people, I don't know how many, maybe 500 or something, I don't know. I don't remember. 72% of the respondents said that it is more likely that she is a bank teller and an active feminist. Well, obviously, these people are irrational, right? Because, you don't need all this stuff about young, single, outspoken, very bright, deeply concerned with discrimination, social justice. You don't need that to know that it's more likely that you are a bank teller. The conjunction fallacy. It's more likely that A is true than that A and B is true. Okay, so these people are obviously fools, and they are irrational, and they can't be expected to get it right in any economic situation, right? Okay. Now let me tell you a story. I was writing this paper. It's a few years ago. I've been writing this paper for about 20 years, by the way. I was writing this paper and about 5 or 6 years ago, as I was in the middle of writing this paper, one of my great-grandsons or great-grandchildren visited me. And he asked, he says, great-grandpa, or grandpa he calls me, yes, why did Napoleon wear suspenders? Okay. And I thought and thought, and why would Napoleon wear suspenders? Yes, and I thought and thought about it, and I couldn't get the answer, and so I said, okay, okay, I give up. Tell me what the answer is. So he said to hold up his pants. Now, I felt pretty foolish about this, yes. Obviously, everybody wears suspenders, including your humble servant wears suspenders to hold up his pants. Why else would you wear suspenders, yes? So why didn't I get this answer? Why do 72% of the people get the Linda thing wrong? What's the real rule? What's the heuristic? What's the bias? What's wrong? Yeah, what did I get wrong, or what did 72% of the people get wrong? It's the relevance maxim. I assumed that Napoleon is relevant. Yeah, my great-grandson asked, why did Napoleon wear suspenders? I was looking around for Napoleon, the great general, the great historic figure. Why would he wear suspenders? But Napoleon is irrelevant. I looked wrong. And the whole story about Linda being young, single, outspoken, very bright, concerned with discrimination, social justice, yes? People were looking over there. They weren't so much looking at the words of the question. They were looking over there. And it's a good rule. It's a good rule, okay? The relevance maxim is a good rule. If you want to find out something, if you ask a question like this, or you're looking for something, looking for clues, who murdered whom, yes? It's good to look at what's relevant, yes? That's a good rule in general. This is obviously a trick question, a contrived question. And, okay, that's my first example, okay? And I'm going to give you some more in the same...
Bob, somebody comments, maybe you want to take it?
Sure, I'll be delighted.
Okay. He says, it's Max Quick, but if the rule evolves and then the environment changes permanently, then the sometimes becomes often for a long time.
Okay, fine, but I am in the process of, it could be, yes, it's a good question. If the environment changes, really, if the environment changes, then the rule could become a poor rule. I mean, that's a very good question. But the environment doesn't change so fast. So maybe now with Corona, it's changing. I don't know, but I haven't seen it changing that much. The environment changes pretty slowly, and usually with the environment changing, the rules change also. The heuristics, the biases, things evolve. But I think I have gone through, I am in the process of going through, I haven't gone through them all. There are about 116 heuristics and biases, okay? And I'm in the process of going through them all, okay? One by one. And I haven't yet found one which does not usually yield good results, except in exceptional or contrived situations. And I don't have a lot of time. So I sometimes when I give this lecture, I'm given an hour, or rather than 35 minutes. I do bring more examples, but today I decided to. In previous editions of this lecture, I give 17 or 18 examples. I don't usually be able to cover them all anyway, even those. But today I decided to stick to 5 examples. 1, overeating. Okay, that's a heuristic, a bias. Okay, it's something not good. All right. Second is the ultimatum game. Third is the endowment effect. These are staples of not eating. Eating is not a staple of behavioral economics, but actually eating is a staple of everybody, but also of economics. But ultimatum game, endowment effect, these are risk aversion. These are the 4 items that I hope to cover. Maybe we'll have time for the dictator game. And finally, there's a very interesting topic called choosing a higher probability of getting killed in combat. But I don't think we're going to have a chance to cover that. So let's go through them one by one. Overeating. Overeating is obviously a poor idea, right? The behavior that we're talking about is that obese people often overeat, okay? Even though they're obese, they overeat. They not only eat what most of us eat, but I'm getting a little obese also. I'm trying to stay away from it, but especially obese people often overeat. The rule that we're talking about is eat when you're hungry, eat tasty food. That's the rule, okay? Now, the analysis. This rule, okay, the analysis is that this is a good rule, but sometimes an exception, and in this case, it's not contrived, it's exceptional. Sometimes it's not good. though we need food for energy, growth, and various vital bodily functions, that is not what makes us eat. Okay? We don't eat because we need food. Yes? I don't say we eat because we're hungry and or because we enjoy food. That's what makes us eat. Hunger and food enjoyment are mechanisms that evolved in order to motivate us to eat. Okay? Evolution did not take into account that people would think things over and say, hey, we need to grow, we need to, we need minerals and so on. You know, evolution evolved the mechanism of hunger and enjoyment of food to get us to eat. But evolution has not yet had time to take account of the sedentary nature of much of modern life. So evolutionarily, obesity is exceptional. So the rule is rational, it's a good rule, in spite of its irrational consequences for the obese. By the way, I think that answers the it answers the question of the question that was asked before. I mean, it contributes to the answer. Because really, that's what happened. Yes, it's a good rule. Eating when you're hungry is a good rule. But now, when there's a lot of food around, it's becoming not such a good rule, okay? And so the guy is right who asked this, or the lady, I don't know which one it is, okay? So I agree completely, and this is a good example of that, of the fact that the questioner is right. This happens, yeah. Let's look at the ultimatum game, which is another staple of behavioral economics. Okay, what is the game? I feel pretty sure that a lot of the people in this audience, by the way, how many people are here? Navin, you know?
There's about 280.
280, wow. Okay. So most of those 280 know about this ultimatum game, but some of you may not, so I'm going to go through the description. Two players, the proposer and responder, must divide $100. If they agree how, each gets his agreed share. If not, both get nothing. They sit at computers in separate rooms and can't communicate directly. The proposer starts by making a numerical offer to the responder without words. You know, he writes it on the computer screen. Okay, he can only make a numerical offer. He can only put a number on the screen. R responds by clicking yes or no. No other response is possible. The game is then over. The players get their payoff, if any. Okay, in other words, if it wasn't rejected, and leave by separate doors. They never see each other nor learn each other's identity. The subjects are students, not particularly long on money. The behavior, most proposers offer around 35. Well, this was done with a lot of people. Smaller offers, say 20, are actually rejected. $20 are rejected. So if you make an offer of $20, the responder is going to walk away from it, and he's a student, presumably not particularly long on money. Now, what rule is he going by? The rule he's going by is don't let people kick you in the stomach, okay? Reject lopsided offers. That's the rule. Okay, is this a good rule or a bad rule? The mechanism for executing the rule, like hunger for eating, are feelings of wounded pride, insult, desire for revenge, honor. The rule and its mechanism evolved in natural scenarios where the negotiators know each other, or they're sitting opposite each other. If in such scenarios you accept lopsided offers, you'll get a reputation for doing so, and in the future will get only such offers. So it's not because you're thinking about it, yes? You're not thinking about that in the future you get only offers, about reputational effects. You're thinking about pride, insult, revenge, honor. Those are the things you're thinking about. But actually, those things lead to rejecting lopsided offer, and rejecting is highly rational in this case because of the reputational effects. In the contrived artificial ultimatum game, reputational effects don't apply. As the players are totally anonymous, they leave by different doors, they never saw each other, they're never going to see each other, they sit in separate rooms. But the rule and its mechanism evolved in natural situations where they do apply. The rule is rational. We have rule rationality in spite of its irrationality in the contrived ultimatum game. Okay, that's the second example. The endowment effect. Okay, the behavior is as follows. In an experiment, subjects first given a Swiss chocolate bar were generally unwilling to trade it for a coffee mug, whereas the subjects first given a coffee mug were generally unwilling to trade it for a chocolate bar. Okay, this experiment was reported in a paper by Kahneman, Knetsch, and Dick Taylor in 1991. Okay, Dick got the Nobel Prize a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, for his work in behavioral economics. So what's the rule? What's going on? Prefer your own unless you have good reason not to. Okay? All other things being equal, prefer your own. Prefer what you own. That's the rule. Analysis. Already the 2,000-year-old Talmud in Bava Metzia 38a notes that a person prefers one measure of his own grain to 9 measures of another's. Okay? They're talking about a case where a person gave somebody else some grain to watch, to be responsible for, and then he disappeared and didn't show his face again. Are you allowed to sell the grain or not? You know, before it spoils, okay? And they say you shouldn't sell it because the person prefers one measure of his own grain to 9 measures of another's. Presumably the reason is familiarity. You know your own merchandise. You don't know somebody else's merchandise. You know your own. Maybe your own is exceptional. Would you trade your 2018 Chevy for someone else's? No, you wouldn't. But if you have good reason, you would trade your 2018 Chevy for a 2020 new Cadillac from the dealer, okay? But to trade a coffee mug, it's not, to trade a coffee mug for a chocolate bar. You have a chocolate mug, coffee mug, and it's built into you that to hold on to your own. If you don't, if it's not trading a Chevy for a Cadillac, hold on to your own. It's not that people figured this out rationally, but it evolved. It has worked well for millennia under natural circumstances. We're talking about the 2,000-year-old Talmud. So it has itself become a mechanism. It's automatically applied to trivial, contrived situations. The subjects in this experiment automatically apply to trivial, contrived situations like chocolate, coffee mugs and chocolate bars, where it doesn't really apply. Okay? That is the endowment effect. And now we have 5 minutes left. We're going to talk about risk aversion. That's number 4, and it's just as I thought. Numbers 5
Oh,
and 6.
you can go 10 minutes.
Huh?
You
5
can go 10 minutes and
10
leaving.
minutes, I know, but I want to leave more time for discussion.
Okay.
So I'm going to limit myself to 35, unless people explicitly ask, or unless there's time in the discussion period.
Okay.
Okay. Let's talk about risk aversion. Rabin and Dick Thaler, in the Journal of Economic Perspectives, 2001, consider a risk averter whose von Neumann-Morgenstern utility functions calls for rejecting a half-half lottery between losing $10 and winning $11 at any asset level. Okay, so they're so risk averse that they would reject that. Okay, they show that such a risk averse, okay, they do a mathematical calculation that shows that such a risk averter also rejects a half-half lottery between losing $100 and winning $10 billion. In fact, I think the NM utility function is in fact, I think, bounded. Okay, so so they reject the von Neumann-Morgenstern utility theory. Okay, so what's going on over here? The rule is avoid undue risk. Analysis. Practically, risk aversion refers to considerable risks. Okay, a risk averter is, you know, when you, I don't want to take that risk. Doesn't mean that that is not. We're not talking about $10 or $11. A half-half lottery between losing $10 and winning $11 is contrived. It doesn't occur naturally. You don't, this is obviously an experiment, yes. It's not gonna happen. Nothing, people are not approached with that kind of bet, okay? So evolution does not apply to it. The rule avoid undue risk evolved in a natural setting where the risks are considerable. So it too has itself become a mechanism. It's automatically applied, just like eating, okay, or revenge or honor or holding on to your own, yes. It's automatically applied to trivial, contrived situations, like the Rabin-Thaler example, to which evolution does not apply, okay? So I'm going to wind this up now, and we'll see how the question period goes. Conclusions. Game and economic theory are valid after all. On the whole, people do behave rationally. It's not true what we often hear in the wake of behavioral economics, that people don't behave as economists think. It's just not true. People do behave. It's because they don't behave because they figured things out, but they behave because the rules that evolve usually give rational behavior. Behavioral economics is also valid. Indeed, I claim it's a real synthesis that I'm talking about. I'm not coming here to knock behavioral economics. It's a real synthesis. It's very important. People do not consciously optimize. They follow rules of thumb, also known as heuristics and biases. So it's important to know what the rules are, okay? A restaurant serving wholesome but tasteless food will quickly go out of business. All right, you're not. You have to know what the rules are and take advantage of those rules if you want to stay in business. Okay. The last conclusion is, in short, far from contradicting each other, game and economic theory and behavioral economics complement each other beautifully. In fact, behavioral economics is what makes game and economic theory work on a practical level. Game and economic theory is based on behavioral economics because behavioral economics usually leads to rational results, to the results of game and economic theory, okay? Now, I always present different versions of this lecture, but I have to admit that this isn't the first time I presented it, and I hope it's not going to be the last time. And on a previous time, one of the chat people, they didn't ask this out in the open, I wish they would have. They said, no behavioral economist is going to argue with this. But that's not true. The behavioral, maybe they're not going to argue with it. Maybe they'll say, okay, but they save all their fire for they put all the emphasis on the bad conclusions, the times that people in fact do not behave rationally. All the emphasis is on the shortcomings, on the cases when all the experiments is when the things do not lead to good results. And I say the opposite. It should be the emphasis of behavioral economics should be the same as economic theory on when the results are good. So thank you very, very much. I've run 2 minutes over the time I set myself, and this appeared in Nature Human Behavior. You can write it down. It was posted on the conference website. And I'm open to questions.
Yeah. Bob, first of all, I want to call Myrna Wooders, want to ask. Unmute yourself, please, and ask a question.
So this concerns the Linda problem that Bob and I have sort of chatted about before. You see, I think the problem with the Linda problem is that the experimenters did not understand the common language. According to common language, the Linda question has a part of it that's implied. One is Linda is a bank teller and not a feminist, right? That's what's implied in that setting. It's like, in some sense, and of course the other part of it is Linda is a bank teller and a feminist. The two of those go together. And the fact that most people get it wrong, according to Kahneman and Tversky, is because they answer according to the common language. So I think that the right, if things are expressed in the common language, then I think people would understand. In fact, John Wooders, with the help of John Wooders, we've come up with an experiment to make this point. You know, I think that if you add, it's like the Napoleon in a way. Napoleon should be relevant, right? Or would be relevant in the common language. So,
yeah. I think that the two things are a little different, but they point in the same direction. I think Napoleon, you can't argue with my great-grandson. He did wear suspenders to hold up his pants, and I think over there the relevance maxim is what's driving it. In the Linda example, you could be right. It might not be the relevant, but even if people understood a bank teller or a bank teller to imply bank teller but not a feminist, or which is could be implicit but not explicit. Even if people did not accept that, then still they might answer that she is more likely to be a bank teller and a feminist. Because, I mean, you ask these questions, you tell this long story, and the natural answer is feminist. Feminism has got to be in there in some way. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, there is some question from the audience. Rules seems to be not observable. How can we infer from some isolated behavior or a set of behaviors of an agent about what rule is being followed by the agent?
I think in many situations, maybe we can't, but in many situations, the rules that, what I'm trying to sell over here is that the heuristics and biases, and they are explicit, okay? The heuristics and biases are explicit, and there's a list of quite a few of them. I don't know, 70, 80, 90, 100. I'm trying to work through them. And what I'm arguing is that those which are considered irrational by sometimes lead to irrational answers, yeah, those rules are themselves good rules, okay? So there I'm not looking at a given behavior and trying to determine to which rule it applies, but I'm looking at the rule which is claimed by the BE people to be irrational. I'm saying it's a good rule, okay? So I'm looking at the rule and not the behavior. I'm not trying to fit the behavior to some rule, but I'm looking, is this rule which they have identified, is it a good rule? And I say yes, in most cases it is good.
And unfortunately, I have to cut it here. And I just want, as a concluding remark, Bob, you impress us not only by your clear and interesting talk, but also by your young look and your great passion that competes impressively with even most youngers. Keep going. Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Bob.